Hi everyone, this is my third and final review of the PAUL Rubens Opaque Watercolors. I first tried to paint with them like with gouache, then I painted with them on black paper to see how really opaque they are. Since they are supposed to be a hybrid between watercolors and gouache, this time I'm going to try to do a watercolor painting with them. Some of you might recognize this painting because I have already painted it with another medium, some water-soluble markers. But since it didn't turn out too well and I really liked this reference photo, I wanted to do it with the PAUL Rubens Opaque Watercolors. So as I started adding water to my little blob on my palette, I noticed right away some pretty thick particles that were floating in the water. And that made me realize that I really had to dilute the paint a lot. Those particles can be diluted some more, but if you're not careful, like I was, I was actually not careful at first, I ended up with thick lines of paint on my paper that I had to dissolve on the paper itself. Now, while I'm using 140-pound watercolor paper, I'm kind of regretting not using cotton paper to really give them a fair try. But this paper is really not too bad. And it worked pretty well if I was careful of how much water or how well I dissolved the pigments. And you know how it is, you might be carried away in your painting and just like dipping your brush into your little puddle and not realizing that there's some pigments that haven't been diluted. And that's never happened to me with actual watercolors. So it was pretty fun to use. I don't know if it's the paper or not. The wet on wet technique wasn't the best. And you can tell that they're pretty opaque. They're not like true transparent watercolors, and they don't claim to be. But I found that the best way to use them was to basically color within the lines and use just a uniform wash within a given area. So my final verdict is this. And it's just my humble opinion, according to the way I use them. You know, some people might use them another way and enjoy it better or not like it at all. But when I used them as gouache, they were very nice. They worked very well. Not as well as actual gouache though. But you can definitely adjust your technique to make it work for you. When I used them on black paper, it was a little harder to work because they were not as opaque as actual gouache. But again, you can adjust your technique and make it work. And now using them as watercolors, they work fine as watercolors, but not quite as well as regular watercolors. So, or at least transparent watercolors. So the way I actually enjoyed using them was more like when I was coloring the leaves and I was applying uniform washes and I was not trying to use any particular techniques. I would just make a little puddle of uniform color and fill in within the lines. It worked very well, and then I was able to use the paint in a thicker way for all the pastils, and that worked very well. So I personally would use these opaque watercolors more for illustrations, just coloring my illustrations with a flat wash and then adding details with a thicker paint, more like gouache. In that way, I think these paints would work very well, and it could be the way they were intended to be used. I'm not quite sure. But yeah, that's what I think about them. And if you have used them before, let me know what you think. If you like to use them a certain way, or if you don't like them at all. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you're feeling very generous and you would like to support this channel, you can always click on the thanks button right next to the share button. Thank you all for stopping by. I'll see you soon with another video. Have a wonderful day. Bye bye.